Hi guys, welcome to the latest podcast of Yarn and Black. Today I've got a really great friend of mine, Ngarra Murray on. Hi Ngarra.
Hi, how are you, AJ?
I'm fine. Before we get to know Ngarra a bit better, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm broadcasting from. I'm here in Balug, on the land of the Wurrung people. I want to pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, but also like to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people that joined us today and to Ngarra herself. So Ngarra, welcome to the podcast and tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where you're from?
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. So my name's Ngarra Murray and I'm a Wamba Wamba, Yorta Yorta, Dja Dja Wurrung and Doodle woman. And I'm based in Melbourne on Wurundjeri country and have a lot of strong family links to mob right throughout Victoria and New South Wales.
Cool. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Melbourne?
So I was born in Melbourne in Preston, and then as a 6-week-old baby, I went and lived at the Wirramina hostel with my parents, who were taking on a role with a number of Koori kids. So I grew up my first kind of 5 years in the hostel with all the Koori kids, and they became kind of like my brothers and sisters in the hostel before we eventually moved up to Shepparton on Yorta Yorta country. So I went to school up in Shepparton and spent all my school years up there with our mob. And as a 17-year-old, moved back down to Melbourne. So I've kind of been in Melbourne for quite some time now.
Now, you mentioned brothers and sisters. You do have quite a few brothers and sisters.
I do. I have 11 brothers and sisters. So
Yeah.
I have 6 brothers and 5 sisters, but I'm the second oldest of the 12 of us. So yeah, we're a big family and we've got like 28 kids, I think, between all of us. So yeah, our family just keeps growing and growing. But yeah, big mob and, based kind of right across Victoria.
Yeah. So you went to school in Shep.
I
So
did.
tell us, how much Aboriginal studies did you learn at school at the
Yeah,
time?
so at that time, growing up in Shepparton, and I went to Shepparton High School back then, when we were taught about Aboriginal studies, it was usually from a non-Aboriginal perspective. And we learnt a lot about Captain Cook and that he discovered Australia. So a very white interpretation and the history from a coloniser's perspective. So that was kind of the school environment that we grew up in, even though we had a lot of Koori kids up there in Shep, growing up in the community. But back then it was very black and white. So it was a tough kind of town to grow up in, but I learned a lot of my knowledge, from our family and growing up with the old people, like our grandparents, and learning the old school ways. So our family are very cultural and political. So political people in the sense that, our family's always been engaged in politics and advocacy and activism and the fight for rights. So I think the land rights movement in particular has been really central to a lot of families' political activism. So we've got a long and proud history of fighting for our rights, but of advocacy, of self-determination. So that's kind of like how we grew up. And in the country too, like being a country kid, bit more slow-paced, than growing up in Melbourne, but we always had our mob around in our community and very, tight-knit community back in those days. So, yeah, so I think that, back then when we learn about Aboriginal studies at school, it's very different. When I think of my kids now and what they learn, they go to school, they wear their Koori T-shirts, the cultural component of who we are is really embedded in, like my daughter's school, for example. And they learn Wurundjeri Wurrung language on their curriculum. And, it's fantastic to see that change from when I was a little girl going to school.
So at the moment, you're part of the First Peoples Assembly.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell
So
us exactly how you got that role and what was the process of you getting that role?
Yeah, so I'm the co-chair of the First Peoples Assembly along with Ruben Berg. And we represent, in my position, represent the diverse communities of the Metropolitan. So this is the second term that I've been voted in by the community. So it's an incredible responsibility and a real honour to be elected to the Assembly alongside kind of 31 other deadly, community members who represent the regions of Victoria, where they come from, and as we kind of work towards treaties. So yeah, it was a big decision for me maybe over 4 years ago to put my hand up and run for the Assembly. But I felt like I had something to offer and to contribute to the space, and it's been an incredible journey to get to where we are today. And it's been a culmination of all the different people and our elders and ancestors that have kind of gotten us to this point through all those decades of fighting for our rights to get us towards treaties. So yeah, it's an exciting time. As I said, it's a huge responsibility that we carry, and it's not easy either because there's so much in it, but something that I don't take for granted, and I feel really privileged to be able to be a part of.
So people who don't know what a treaty is, what is a treaty, and then why do we need it?
Yeah, so when you look at what is a treaty, well, it is an agreement, and it's coming together with a number of parties or two parties to look at a relationship going forward, and basically, you know, us coming together, for example, with the state government to kind of sit down at the table as equals and to negotiate on a variety of matters that impact us and are part of our daily lives. So treaties more than a destination in a way, because even though it is an agreement and it is agreement making, but for us with this treaty journey, it's really going to be about our deep connections to the land and with each other, and how we reset relationships, how we coexist, and how we envision a future where our rights and our dignity and even our sovereignty are respected by all, and really creating a kind of healed and healthy country for everyone that lives in this part of Australia, so within Victoria. So we all have a role to play and responsibility to get us to better relationships, to a better future that respects and recognises our people, and to how we'll coexist, you know, well into the future. So it's really about a treaty for the generations to come. And once we activate, you know, our agreement making, and this will be forever because this is just going to go over the generations. So it's really transformational, I believe. I think there's a lot in a treaty, and it can be interpreted in many different ways and different perspectives. But really it's coming together to sit down, to look at responsibilities, to look at mutual obligations and how we can create a better future together, and to reset, I think, our relationship with the state, but also to acknowledge through the truth-telling component of the work that we're doing around acknowledging, you know, the injustices and atrocities that have happened to our people. So we need a lot of healing. So we need peace, we need healing, and we need treaties in our future to sit down with different parties. You can treaty with the state. You know, we probably need treaties amongst ourselves and our own nations and family groups. There'll be treaties where we'll add in different parties, whether it's local council or, you know, there'll be different groups that'll have interests. So I think that, yeah, there'll be many treaties to come, and that's the exciting part. And like I said, it'll be something that will carry over generations.
Do you think community have a good understanding about the treaty process?
I think so, but I think there's so many different levels of understanding, because some of our mob, like they'll just want to know what is a treaty, like that question you asked, but then others will be really informed and feel ownership of the process, and they're really up with it. But there's so much to process, and I think across our community we have really diverse levels of understandings of what it is and where we're at in the process. So we've got to work really hard to make sure that we bring our people with us, and that they understand, they feel informed, and they're armed and skilled and ready to do treaties, because there'll not only be a statewide treaty, there'll also be, you know, treaties with all the traditional owner groups. So it's about getting treaty ready and preparing, and to come together with our communities to work out how we'll govern and how we'll approach treaty, and how we'll sit down at the table. So there's a lot of work in it. And obviously when I reflect on the achievements of our first term, like we really laid the foundation of treaty making and established kind of the ground rules, and we put in place now the independent treaty umpire, which is the treaty authority. We've got a self-determination fund, so there's resources there for traditional owners to support them to mobilise and organise. So it's been a monumental feat, thanks to the commitment of the members, but also the support of our community. So I think that the Assembly really mirrors the diversity of our mob. Like, we're all very diverse, different, have different perspectives. But it sort of works because we come together and we all have that common goal of treaties. It's just how we get there, because it's not easy coming together with 32 people on one kind of representative body, but it kind of works because we're all there for the future of our people, especially our young people, but also, you know, to get to that goal of treaties and have a kind of brighter future for our mob.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I want you to keep doing it because you do it really well.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that support.
Yeah, I'm here behind you. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Oh, deadly.
A couple of questions I'm going to ask you is, when you finished high school, did you go to study anything at uni?
No, so when I finished high school, I just went into the workforce. So I've been really lucky to have a really diverse background, from the arts to cultural heritage, into health, into kind of education. I've recently spent 10 years working in Oxfam, Australia. So, you know, working in the kind of national space, but the international space as well. So I've been really fortunate to kind of organically fall into roles. And I think one thing I've really applied is my loyalty and really kind of riding it out and coming into a space, whether it is a not-for-profit space or it's, you know, I worked at the museum, like at Bunjalaka for many years. I think that's where we met, AJ, all them years ago at the museum. So I've been, really fortunate to kind of come into spaces. And I think I kind of had that natural kind of support around being in the human rights space because of the kind of history of my family. And as I said, we're kind of a political, cultural family, and that history that we've had in a human rights space, that's kind of naturally been built into me. So it's sort of in my blood to be in spaces like this. So, yeah, so from school, I think it was really about getting out into the world and learning as much as I can, reading as much as I can, you know, traveling and meeting people. I think my learnings and my travels across the world have really shaped like my journey in my, you know, kind of personal, political, professional life. And it's shaped my leadership, but really transformed the way I think about leadership as well. Because I think it's broadened my awareness and perspective beyond my community too. So yeah, so it's been really deadly to be in all these different spaces. But as I said, it's quite diverse, my background, to get to where I am today.
Now, you mentioned leadership. What makes a good leader?
Yeah, well, I think like I'm a big believer of collective leadership and really growing the power of the people to build strength like in our communities and really find common ground amongst our leaders and all the different mobs, you know, that we're part of. So I think leadership is stronger in a collective. That's how I've always felt, and there's never been a need for leadership development as much as we need now, because I think leadership's changing too, like in the future of leadership. It's adaptable and it is collaborative and empowering. So having really strong, accountable and ethical leaders for me is really important. So I love the visionary leadership that, you know, a lot of our elders and leaders have right now, and really using their heads and hearts to really grow the power of the people. So I think that community power that we have, that supports us. But yeah, we all have leaders in our own family, I think, and it's probably, you know, interpreted in different ways what it actually means. But I think that, yeah, there's a big thing now for me, I suppose, around that generational handover, because, you know, you get to a certain age and you're not youth and you're not eldership. You're kind of in the middle, and I think a lot of our age group, we probably do a lot of the work in between. So I think that, yeah, it's never simple, the path that follows after that kind of handover that you get. So, you know, I think of how, you know, I've got elders that are still real leaders in my eyes, so I don't necessarily think that I'm there yet, but making my way there. But yeah, it's never simple after taking on that role of leadership too, I think. But yeah, like I said, I'm a big believer of kind of flat leadership and the collective power of people.
Now, you're also awarded the Emerging Leader Award in 2010, wasn't it? Or was it?
Yeah, I think it was way back then. Yes, it's probably about 14 years ago. Yeah, that was way back then, I think it's quite a unique program that they have, the Fellowship for Indigenous Leadership, because it really nurtures and fosters more, but organically too, I think, that support that we've needed. And I've really learned a lot being part of that alumni and the journey I've been on myself, and that support too that we have. And if you look at all the people that have been part of that fellowship, they're in really like significant roles and doing really amazing work, at all levels right across our community. So yeah, so it was a real honor to be an emerging leader in the program. And I think that I've really benefited from that support of that kind of fellowship, and the young people and the elders of kind of the leadership within that group.
So what was your project that you did in that year that you did emerging leader?
Yeah, so back then I think it was around working with the elders and the history side of things, and telling a story, because I'm a real kind of history buff. I've learned a lot about my history and my connection, and I think I get that from my father. He's been really instrumental in teaching us all the knowledges he has around our people and where we come from and our country and our cultural ways. So he's really had that cultural authority to really pass on, those stories. So yeah, I've been kind of really fortunate to have that. So sharing that more broadly around the history. I think at the time too, at the time we worked on our grandfather's exhibition, and at the time we had the launch of the Pastor Sadug and Lady Nicholls memorial statue that was launched in the Parliament Reserve, the first kind of statue of an Aboriginal couple, because we thought Nan was really important too to be part of that, and we wanted to recognise both of them. But yeah, there was a bit of a history project, and then we did an exhibition on the kind of the lives of our grandparents and the fight for rights and the work that my grandfather in particular had done, over decades. And yeah, so that was a bit of a history kind of project that I ended up doing. So it was good to kind of have a focus and a priority for that time in my kind of journey through the fellowship program, and just to have those mentors around, like Uncle Paul Briggs, like Daphne, like the different leaders and elders that have been part of it, and all the young fellas too that have been part of it, like Belinda and Ruben. It's funny that years later, Ruben and I are both co-chairs of the assembly. So I think, it's been a really important part of my journey. So the work that we did in that kind of fellowship program.
A buzzword that goes around a lot is truth telling, and that's
yes.
What does it mean to you? What does real truth telling mean?
Yeah, so I think when we started the conversations around treaty and on that kind of road to treaty, we talked about we couldn't have treaty without the truth telling. So that was a big thing for us. And the members on the assembly, we talked about how we could kind of progress that element of our kind of being. So having truth telling, in this country. So we're really fortunate that out of the assembly and the conversations grew actions around us establishing the Yorta Justice Commission. So when we think of voice, treaty, truth, like in Victoria, I really believe we're really advancing all three. But truth telling for us, I think, is a really critical time for us now, and it's going to be really vital in our way going forward around having the real history of this country told, because this country's been built, on a lie in a way. So I think that, treaty has the potential to really impact, the narrative, but truth telling needs to be done first. So the way that Yorta has been set up was to really look at an inquiry, obviously, into the atrocities and injustices of our people. So for us, the truth-telling component is a really big part of it. And, the history of this country, you just had to look at the results from the referendum and to see the outcome of that and how brutal the referendum debate was, and that there are a lot of truths that need to be told. So I think that Yorta is in a really good position to really have a transactional record of what has happened to us, the atrocities, the injustices, the massacres, the stolen wealth. There's just so much that we need to consider. But I think Yurrung will really look at those appropriate forms of public awareness and strategies, like if it's, say, in regards to education, like we're talking about how truth-telling, for example, and the outcomes of that, of the inquiry, can be maybe embedded, for example, like getting the Victorian school curriculum changed around the history of this country. So there's definitely ways, I think, through Yurrung, they've examined a number of thematic areas like the criminal justice system or the child protection system. I think now, like, they're in the land injustice theme, and they'll do, health, education, housing. So I think it's profound, the work that they are doing. And for once, we'll get some truth telling, and that will really help with, resetting those relationships, as I talked about, with treaty and the way that we go forward, because we need a lot of peace and we need healing, Like, our people are so traumatized from colonization, and we still carry that today. And I think our people need healing more than ever. And I hope that the truth telling within this country, and in particular in Victoria with the Yurrung inquiry, will contribute to that and change the narrative.
That's really good. I really like that, what you just said then.
Yeah.
Allyship is an interesting thing, because being black fellas, we can't turn off being black, but allies can turn off their allyship at any time.
Yes.
What makes a good ally?
Yeah, well, I think, like, if I think back to working in the not-for-profit space, like, allyship, there's a huge support there for us, but it's how we kind of manifest that support. And I think there's definitely some work that probably needs to be done around decolonizing solidarity and what is really allyship, and what does self-determination mean in practice for us, because they do use a lot of our language, right? They use the words of truth telling, they use the words of kind of decolonizing, so what does that actually mean? But I think that, with the referendum, we've seen a lot of support, even though we had, the results we had, we did see a lot of support across the country. So how do we manifest that now into the space to really support us, for example, like, as we lead into trade negotiations and treaties? Like, we really need to get that support, because we know we've got thousands of people out there. But I think that the biggest thing of being an ally is that we need that support, but for non-Aboriginal people also to know their place and not to overstep as well. But we do need that support, because we can't do it without non-Aboriginal people. Like, we need that support right across the country, and they need to support our kind of asks around self-determination, us taking back control of our affairs, respecting our decision-making and cultural authority, and really recognising and respecting that we're the oldest living people in the world, and we've got a lot to contribute to this country, and we need to be respected. So we need a bit of an awakening, I feel, that recognises not only our custodianship of these lands, but, what we've been fighting for all this time. But, yeah, I think a big thing for allies is to just know your place and where you fit in this sort of society. But when it comes to our people, and, never speak on our behalf. There's a number of rules, I think there is, for mob that, working with allies. So, yeah. But, yeah, we appreciate all the support we get. And, like, even with treaty, like, we work really hard to kind of get across to all the different communities right across Victoria, whether it's our mob or it's, all the multicultural communities, the wide stream, in the mainstream, like, we're really working hard to share that treaty message and what we're trying to achieve. So we're going to need everybody, to come with us and to get us over the line.
Yeah. And in doing everything that you do, you're also a mum of 4 kids.
Yes.
How do you manage that as well?
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, I'm a mum of 4 kids. They
That's
keep
a
me
case
really
management
busy.
job in itself. Sorry, that's a case
It is.
job in itself.
It totally is. But they keep me busy, and I've got really good kids. I'm really, like, fortunate, and we spend a lot of time as a family, but also on country, and really keep, ourselves grounded. So I'm kind of preparing them for the world they inherit. I've got a little treaty kid, little 8-year-old, that follows me around and is part of kind of, the treaty spaces that we're in. So she's growing up, that's all she knows is treaty. So I hope that that can happen for all kids into the future, that we'll have, you know, treaty kids black and white. But yeah, I think it's just finding the balance. You know, I've got my second child going through VCE, and so I've got 2 in high school and 1 in primary school, and 1 just become an adult. So it's just finding the balance. And I think, you know, a lot of self-care, because our space can be really heavy too, you know, our space. So I think it's important that we make sure we prioritize like our health and well-being, and we have strong boundaries, and we take downtime, and as I said, self-care. So it can get hard because as mothers, you know, we put others before ourselves. So it's a hard habit to break. But I think yeah, I count my blessings, and I'm really grateful for our lives and the privileges that we have. And when I think back to my grandmother, you know, growing up on Gourmjanyuk mission, and only being allowed to go to grade 3, I just think I've had so much more opportunities since then, and we've come a long way. But yeah, I'm just really grateful for the life that I have, and my deadly kids. And as I said, they're kind of treaty kids. They get dragged around. They probably get annoyed with it sometimes, but yeah. But otherwise, yeah, it's definitely being a mum, and yeah, it's probably my biggest job.
Yeah. Well, I've met your kids and they're all beautiful, and you've
Yeah.
raised some really great kids. That's
Oh,
for sure.
thank you. Yes.
Bit of a question. If I could give you $1 zillion and a magic wand
Mm-hmm.
and ask you to fix something in Indigenous affairs, where would you start, or what would you work on first?
Oh, where would I start? Well, I think that money, when I think of what I could do from a treaty perspective, I
Yep.
think that would have, you know, significant impact on Aboriginal affairs and where we're at, you know, in this time in our lives. So I really think that treaty has the potential to really significantly impact, you know, our communities, and whether that's around us being traditional owners. I'd probably buy land, I think, too. Like, that's a big one, because sometimes I think that's all we want is our land to go and be with our mob and families and be on country and practice, you know, be our like cultural and be Aboriginal. I think, you know, we just want to get on with our lives. And so, yeah, I'd maybe have I'd probably do a land back thing, or purchase some land with that gazillion dollars for all the mob to come and, you know, be on their country. So yeah, I think that's probably what I'd do.
Now, there's lots of young people that I work with that are finding out about their Aboriginality but don't know much about it. What advice could you give them to where should they start looking and searching?
Yeah, well, I think we're all on our own journey in a way. Like, but yeah, there's a lot of people that still finding their cultural connection, and they're on their own journey. So I think that's one thing our mob here in Victoria, where we've always embraced and been really supportive of all people from all different, you know, country. And so I think that, yeah, for young fellas and people trying to find their connection, it's definitely going back to, if they are aware, if they're not part of, you know, being dispossessed and dispersed and removed from country, because we have a lot of our mob, you know, our stolen generations people and families. But I think if they can go back to where they sort of come from, their traditional owner groups, to find out, you know, information about where they fit and how they can be part of a shared learning and understanding of who we are as a people, I think that would be really beneficial. To start back with the mob, and to have a yarn with the elders and different leaders within those groups, and just get involved and show up and be present. I think that's the best way to kind of, you know, get people involved, and for mob to come in and kind of understand where they fit, and to listen in and to learn their story, because we're all part of a story. It's who we are as Aboriginal people. So yeah, that's probably my advice. And there's so many deadly people around that can teach the young fellas, and we've got so many different spaces we can be part of, and you know, our community organizations and things are always happening. So yeah, there's definitely ways that you can connect in to the community.
So you've worked in community jobs, you've worked in government jobs, but what do you get most out of working with community?
Yeah, I think it's just like, for me, really growing the power of the people. that's what I love to see, our mob self-determining, empowered, inspired. And, we live in two worlds from living in our world, the Aboriginal world, and also in the mainstream. But how do we find that balance? And I think that's a big one for me, like kind of, living in two worlds and kind of being content with where you are.
Yeah. I've got two questions left. One is, if you could go back in time, what would you tell young Ngarra?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe just to say like everything will be fine, because I can get really stressed out and intense, and just to be calm and just to write it out and go with it. Yeah, that's probably the advice. And just to have fun too, like, because we do, carry a lot of, as I said, stress and intergenerational trauma, and our space is so heavy, can be brutal, and there's so much happening in our world. But just to, be calm and kind of go with it and write it out.
Yeah. And I'm watching the times. I know how busy you are as the co-chair, and even to get you on, I had to go through a PA to get to you. So how busy you are and important right now. But my last question is, what would you like people to walk away with from our yarn this morning?
Yeah, well, I suppose just for people to learn a little bit about me and my story, and that I really believe that treaty is our future, and that's the kind of era that we're going into. We've come from a really, strong people, and as I said, we've got a long and proud history of fighting for our rights. But I think that we're in a stage now where we'll enter into a treaty era. And I hope that for our people, we will get justice, and we will get peace, and we will have our people's inherent rights respected and recognised. So that's kind of how I'm feeling now. So I'm kind of excited about where we're at, but acknowledge that we have a lot of pain and suffering, sorry business that happens across our communities. But we're in a good position now, and have a really strong pathway to treaty for our people here in Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I want to say thank you for joining me today, and I know the guests that will be listening to the podcast have learnt quite a lot from what you've actually said today, especially around the treaty process as well. So, guys, I want to thank Ngarra for actually joining us today, and please look after yourself, and I'll see you guys at the next podcast. And thanks, Ngarra.
Thank you.